Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. We are waiting for our secret word of the day from Greg Baldini so we can prove that we are in fact live. So welcome everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. We're very happy to have you here. It is now another day closer to the end of the weekend.
My dad used to say this to people at work, which they didn't find very funny. It would be on Friday, and as they were leaving, go, you know the best thing about Friday? Only 2 more days till Monday.
Yeah, I'm sure. I wonder why they didn't like that.
That's funny.
Let me check out.
We were just talking before the podcast started. Seth was asking, hey, I've been listening to the podcast. I seem like I'm a bit quieter than everyone else on the podcast. And I was like, well, and Tommy chimes in. Look, perfect, Tommy. You were speaking with two Italians. They only have two volume levels, loud and louder. There it is. The secret word of the day is chartreuse. We should start giving away things.
Wow.
Yeah, chartreuse.
Yeah, that's nice.
Oh, is today the 4th? May the 4th be with you.
My wife, who doesn't like Star Wars at all, woke up this morning and says, "What are you going to do about Star Wars May 4th on the podcast?" And I was like, "I don't even know." She's like, "You should play the song." I'm like, "That's copyright infringement. I cannot play the song."
We're almost at 2 years. We're 2 weeks away from 2 years. Let's keep it going.
My opinions of your wife just may have changed a little bit.
She doesn't watch Star Wars at all, and somehow she knows. So the only reason I think she knows these things is because she swipes through like Instagram or Facebookagram or whatever the thing is these days.
Facebookagram.
And someone else, Twit Faceagram or whatever it is. There's something she's swiping through that gets a snippet, and someone has a little flashy thing that says, "May the 4th be with you," and that's how she knows about these trendy things.
My buddy, this is great actually intro. But my buddy actually started getting like really into Star Wars, and he actually got
Tommy. Let's be honest here, my buddy. Tommy really got into Star Wars.
When you hear the story, you'll know it's definitely not me.
Let me tell you about a friend of mine.
I got a friend. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Everything that matters to me is on the wall.
You're actually, yeah.
And there's a picture of the family above you.
Yeah. They're at the bottom.
Bottom frame. But he actually started buying the costume because then there's actually like a whole club, so to speak. Like, when you go to like somewhere and you see people dressed up in the Star
Comic-Con, right?
No, I mean like if you go to like a baseball game and they walk on the field, or they're at the amusement park. Yeah.
Sure.
You're like,
what are they called? The mascots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. The people dressed as Star Wars.
It's not cosplay, but like the actors of
the actors, so to speak. And you're like, who are they? Where did they come from? So there's actually a whole thing where you actually have to submit a costume, and then you can get invited as that character to go to like. He's gone to charity events. He's literally been he went to Tampa Lightning,
working at an angle here.
Yeah, he was not Darth. I don't know the latest bad guy.
Darth Maul. I was probably not the latest one.
Even more latest than that.
Ondasar. I don't see. Yeah, my Star Wars.
Ondasar. Yeah, that's good. I think that's
actually a goalie for soccer.
Seth almost spit out his coffee.
Well done.
Well done.
But he actually got invited because of his costume was so good. He was on the Tampa Lightning hockey, and they went into the announcing booth on like the May 4th. So there's like this whole thing that you can actually do if you really want to get into it. I have no idea who the bad guy
So basically, you're telling me if we dress up like Star Wars characters, we can
invest
get
enough money,
back access pass to anything we want to go do.
He's gone to Disney. He's gone to Universal Studios dressed as these guys. Yeah.
All right. Well, who's your character, Tommy?
Part of that is
I'm going to be Boba Fett.
Part of that is does he have to work on his voice acting, or does he just not say anything at all?
He built an audio box that sounds like the character. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah,
that's pretty
impressed.
good.
I'm impressed, Tommy. I can't wait to see the outfit next time I see you.
Make sure you put it on, Tommy. We want to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend.
My friend, my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really into Star Trek.
He's a close personal friend of mine, guys. Let me tell you a story.
The only other kind of a news or intro announcements that are out there right now, I believe Power BI Desktop had a minor revision, so it's still the April release. The May release has not occurred yet, but as I was in my Power BI Desktop the other day, it gave me a little notification. Hey, your desktop is out of date. So if you install your desktop from the Microsoft Store by downloading the exe file as opposed to going to the Microsoft Store, I believe the version has changed. I just updated yesterday on 5.3 to a minor revision. So anyways, FYI, that's out there if you haven't seen it. There might be some bug fixes. Hopefully they're fixing the on visual editing debacle that is on visual editing. I was talking with people the last couple of days and there was like, everyone's like, I can't. It's so difficult.
Did you switch back? Because I've been trying to get familiar. Oh,
I will not. I will force myself to learn it. It's the way they're going to go. They're going to make it happen.
If enough people talk bad about it, I don't know.
No, it is the way.
You think they're going to force it?
Oh, they're going to force it for sure. Yeah, I think
the only thing
100% it's coming.
Yeah, the only thing we can do at this point, I think, is talk about like just some of the quality of life improvements around it, because if it's for end users, these are things I think we pointed out on the show. Speaking of quality of life improvements, minor tweak to the
show is your
Power
quality
BI.
of life improvement.
It is. It raises my spirits, and then the rest of the day just
downhill
till the next time we speak. Speaking of quality of life improvements, small one in the Power BI tabs in Microsoft Teams, right? You can almost feel that there hasn't been as much adoption as they want, and maybe it's because you have to like configure things to work, like get the Power BI reports to work in Teams. So now they've like changed that experience to just go grab the link from your Power BI report and paste it in here, right? Like we're
trying to make it as easy as possible.
We're going straight to it. So they've now launched that in there, and that experience has changed. So hopefully it's a little bit better, because to their point in here, right, same report can be used in multiple different teams in different areas. And previous experience, people may not know that they have to go to a different tab or how to configure it, set it up, etc. So
I will say this, something changed inside the service. So remember how I was griping about, hey, by the way, there are differences in Power BI reports that you can't see, the deployment pipelines. So I don't know when it appeared, but over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, I can now see the diff compare button that now appears inside deployment pipelines. So I'm actually quite thrilled about this. You can now publish a report in the data and the data set. The data set, when published to a different workspace, you can now see side by side line level changes, and it shows you exactly what's changing code line by line, basically. So you can actually now in the service see individual changes, and it will highlight where it finds a difference. It'll then point out, okay, this individual line is now different. The option has changed, like the language was US and maybe they formatted it slightly different or something like that. So you can see those individual line changes now in deployment pipelines, which I think actually from a enterprise reviewing standpoint will be very helpful, because as you deploy reports now, you actually have a process you could follow where you now incorporate this as part of your review process. Build a report, make the model, push it to dev, have a review. Sit down with your senior engineer and go through, okay, let's review this. We're going to do a release this weekend. Okay, let's go through the reviews. Which ones are we updating and publishing? And you'll be able to know exactly, oh, we added an annotation on this particular expression. Oh, here it is. It's been removed or added, whatever it is. So anyways, I thought that was a really neat feature that's finally out. And I'm very happy to kind of start playing around with that one as well. Have you guys seen that yet? Have you had a chance to look at that in deployment pipelines?
Saw a touch, but it just shows that Microsoft listens to the podcast. They heard your complaint.
Yeah, they fixed it. It's been so great. Thanks for listening, Microsoft. All one of them have now been listening.
It only takes one, Mike. It only takes one.
It's just Satya at the top.
I was about to say, just happens to be Satya. So
excellent. Well, let's move on to some of our main topic for today. I think this is going to be an interesting thread of conversation here around today. This is a thread that's coming from, I'm trying to get the name here right. I don't know where I put it on Twitter here. I think I navigated away accidentally. Kate Greenbook. Kate Greenbook? Cat Greenbook?
Hang on. I'm on the actual article. And yeah, it's Cat. K-A-T.
Okay. So Cat Greenbook has written an article, and then from that article, she kind of put out a series of how do you communicate about data? and kind of talking about different ways we communicate and then relating that to what happens in reporting. Really interesting article. Tommy, thank you for putting the Twitter feed. So it sounds like in the Twitter feed, this is like a snippet of a number of items that came from her original article and was kind of a Twitter thread that was occurring here. But really good content. And would be curious what you guys' thoughts after you're reading through this one and anything that resonated with you across. How do you communicate using data? My first initial reaction was, in simple terms, she talks about communication is how you share information with someone else. And I think I've resonated with this concept a lot. The idea of that we're using data and visuals to communicate or to talk or express some information between people. And she goes on to say, every day we receive and send communication by using hearing, touch, smell, and taste. And I would say, of all these, I would really like to start tasting my data. I think that would be probably the sense that I miss the most when I'm working on these data pieces.
I was intrigued a little bit about where she was going to go, but I did appreciate the second one where she starts to talk about like smell is data smellification and taste is data tastification. I was like, there's some shirts in here, man. There's got to be some sort.
I make data that has great tastification.
Right. My data tastes amazing.
My data tastes.
I mean, it's the next level of reporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe she's onto something, guys.
Yeah, I think so.
Like
Smell-o-vision.
Maybe computers. Maybe we need to build a sensory box that plugs into your computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That emits scents
odors
and fragrance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely think any report Tommy will make will smell like trash.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Like
just kidding.
Just kidding.
Oh man,
what is that?
This report stinks.
Is that old garlic?
Is that old garlic? No, Tommy's reports would smell like pizza every day.
Yeah, it's gonna
cannoli
be Sunday.
Oh, this is my cannoli report.
Yeah. It's like how mom used to make it. That's
just like mom used to make it. Reports just like ma.
Reports like mom used to make them.
Oh, that's good.
That's pretty good. This is a very similar topic. It's kind of like the evolution of 191, which is the data storytelling is the conduit for literacy by Mara Prometi. And this is a great, we've been talking a lot about storytelling and communication. We did the story framing and storyboarding topic. And I think there's a reason why we've been really touching on these topics. To me, I really think we have, I don't want to say an issue, but there is a misconception of what reporting is supposed to be, both in the organization and I think for analysts. So I think they're arising this new content, and I think us talking about it is realizing, yeah, you can build great reports with all the bells and whistles, but there's another purpose here that we really need to be focusing on. And what are we really measuring? But more importantly, how are we communicating or having that dialogue with the user? How are we actually communicating what the questions are? Which it's just not part of documentation. It's not part of, if you're going to look to do how to do Power BI or how to Power BI, that's not part of the conversation right now.
That's a really good point, because you look at all the dashboard in a day, training things, everything is so tactical. Click this button, make this visual, build this DAX. Everything is so mechanical about that. There's a lot less of the, let's call it the fluffy side or the softer side of BI.
The gray area.
Where it's like, how do you develop something that is impactful? And I think later on in Kate's images that she puts here in this Twitter thread, she starts kind of pointing out there's different types of visuals for different types of way of educating people. You have to kind of be naturally curious around information and data. And there's visuals that are used to support discovery, that are used to inform, like an observation is being made. And then there's ones that are being used to educate. Here's what I've found. I'm trying to lead you down a story path to educate you on a particular topic or area. And I feel like these resonate very well with when I see reporting. There is reporting that's very clearly built for discovery. Here's a bunch of things. Click around, find what you want to find. There's also a lot of reporting that is around informing, right? Here's some trends that are not normal, and then how to focus your attention there. And then lastly, the education portion, which I think to me feels a bit more infographic-y in nature, a little bit more styled, I would say.
Well, I think the first stage, I think that, and I don't know if it's chronological, but she talks about that first step is the discover, and that she says like it's discovering or to find data insights. I find it interesting. She's basically correlating the two or associating the two. Discovery is basically the data insights, which again goes against the buzzwords when we talk about Power BI is like find your insights with data. This goes back to the story framing one. I think Ryan Cantrell, I don't remember who wrote the book storytelling, but our purpose, and I think we kind of miss this, is like we have a blank canvas. How many of us are trying to build a report first off, or trying to find the outliers, trying to find interesting tidbits, or in a sense, something unexpected, something new before we actually start building the actual report?
That's a great question. I don't think I do that right away. I think before I build a report, I think I'm asking a lot of questions of why do you need this information? Tell me why. Explain. Sorry, Seth, you're going to say something else?
No, I take it in two different ways, right? Like the discovery or data analysis with visualization, right? Can, in my mind, can mean a couple things. One is you're using Power BI as a tool to access data you can't in other ways. Maybe that's because of the data volumes, maybe because you don't have access to the source systems. So you're actually doing your exploratory data analysis through tables and visuals. The other part of that, though, is also exploratory. You may know your data, but you're just trying to figure out like the best way to represent that to the end user.
That's
and
a
there's
great point
a lot
too.
of playing around that. I think I like the delineation of like her walking through and saying like this is how most people start to play around with visualization. Like you should like see whether or not the data looks best in this bar chart, or maybe it's a stack bar chart, or maybe it's a different way to visualize it all together. And that exploration, I think by nature happens and we just gloss over it, but it's good to talk about it. And that's where I see this kind of experience for most end users is they're trying to put something together for themselves that makes sense, and that's where I view that.
I feel like your comment is also around the idea of beauty is in the eye of the beholder, kind of related. So the like insights are of value to the eye of the beholder kind of mindset. Like, so things that I find insightful about a piece of data or a data set are probably different than what my other audience members potentially would look at in that report. And so I think what you're alluding there to, Seth, is the discovery, and she points out here, how do you find the insight? Who is this information for? And the sentence here in one of the chats here was talking about, if you're the one discovering information, you are the audience. It's you who are thinking through things. So I'm picking out data points that are interesting to me. That may not necessarily translate to the audience you're building this report for. And so so that's where I feel like those initial questions are very important here to say, why do you need this information? What is keeping you up at night? How does this report help you do your daily job?
So I don't want to divert too far. And if it does, we can parking lot this comment. But a lot of like walking through, once again, the communication of data, where my mind goes is this delineation, or is there a delineation between tool like self-service BI and the lay like technical data person in a business unit versus professional data people, right? Where this makes a lot of sense, right? If we're talking about inform to discover and then to educate, especially in the to educate part, how many self-service users of any BI tool are actually doing that or thinking about reporting and visualization to that degree? Or is it they are now because we're talking about it?
Well, I think there's another I think misconception that the self-discovery is not a skill. It is a skill in order to do the exploration side of it. Someone can easily start.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting people can't do their own analysis. Obviously, self-service BI is taking off by storm.
No.
And I think there's a lot of value that automatically, inherently comes out through business units because they know their business.
Yeah.
Right. So they start developing reporting that is relevant to the business, but is it designed with these things in mind? I would argue probably not.
So that's kind of where I was going. I was thinking, when I've looked at reports, there is very specific use cases, and I think people, when they start diving into information and or data, even when you're in Excel, you're usually coming at the information with a very specific question. And I don't think companies spend, well, maybe they do, but I feel like as a business user, when I was in Excel trying to dig through data, usually there was some sort of request that said, hey, we need to understand X or Y, or this, why is the sales down for this customer, or what happened here, or how do we explain this reason? And so what we do is instead of building more broad level reporting that answers multiple questions, I think a lot of the business units focus on very narrow questions or very specific things, and then go hunt for data to support or approve or disprove what that thing is doing. And I feel like that is more where I see a lot of business level reporting occurring. It's very, to your point, Seth, they know their data, they know their business unit, they're building very specific things for them. So a central team has a little bit more of a struggle coming in and saying, let's build you a bunch of reports.
I'm going to disagree. I think that's a very data culture that's very matured, that's doing that has very intimate knowledge of their data, can argue and talk to it. I think a lot of organizations go into reporting with expectations of what it's already going to look like. And they just, in a sense, want to monitor or simply communicate, like, show me sales for each rep, and that will go from there. Show me how many sends we've done, but asking the questions to make
maybe,
decisions. Like, not saying it doesn't happen.
It's a spectrum. I think I would agree.
Yeah.
I see companies doing the same thing you're doing. Like, hey, this is what we should be looking at. But I think also too, some business units, to your point, don't even know what to count, what to measure. Right. How do you, what is the measure of success? We haven't even talked about that yet.
Or they're too focused on a high level number, like, just show me sales for products.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. It's not answering anything, and they want to see that for 2 years. But asking those specific questions, because they may have a project, a campaign, or a decision to make, right?
This is also where I would maybe put in a little bit more language around, or a little bit more thought around. This is why people scream so much when I can't get the export to Excel button, right? If I can't, because if you do this, right, if you ask for these visuals the certain way and you can't get the answer out, well, the reason why people are screaming for Excel to be able to export to Excel is because they either don't understand how to articulate the question, or we're building reports and things that aren't value adding for them, right, in a way that they can then extract that information, and go use it in their own system. So that's like, great, thank you. I can see sales by over year, this year and this last year. Right. But that's not my whole story. I need access to that data so I can do more things with it.
And the last quick thing I'll say is, if you remember, Kurt Bueller had that article about migrating reports. And I think that's also another thing. We've been looking at it this way for so long, we don't know how else to look at it. Where you have an Excel file and they just want to translate that to Power BI. And it's like, this is not saying anything. Let's review what you're trying to get out of this Excel report before we just migrate this to Power BI as is.
This conversation is interesting from the standpoint that I almost wonder if business, and I'm talking about folks that don't know much about Power BI but are coming into reporting tools, if they're just treating it the same way that they've treated other tools in the past, like Excel, right? It's a means for me to extract data and look at it in Excel. Or it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I now have access to these models. I might build a few visuals, or if I do build a report, it's just reporting these specific things, as opposed to building something that solves that I can reference, that answers my questions for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is everything analysis all the time? And because I'm raising this question, because even when we go and talk to folks who have built Power BI reports, or the fun states that they're in, and if you if you want to talk about dissecting another person's report, go check out our Tuesday podcast. But these conversations are where you take reporting into business intelligence, I think, right? And why all of this time spent around how do you take it just from raw information and data dumping and you figuring out like I can extract some data here, I can extract some data there, and then I know this special sauce that nobody else does that I'm going to do on my personal app. Like, no, it doesn't have to be that way, nor should it be that way. If we talk about these things, we have tooling that allows you to just get the answer.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe where increasing data culture within an organization starts to make the biggest difference, because how she's articulating the process of data, information, knowledge, wisdom, right? You have to bring along all these groups that we've now incorporated into this ecosystem that we call self-service, because I don't think that knowledge base is there of how do you raise your game to the next level.
Well, just like there's structured format around Power BI, the technical side, there's really no structured training or structured knowledge path for the soft skills of being able to speak to what are we trying to measure, being able to speak to translating a problem.
It's like a self-studied thing.
It's not saying there is no training on it, but there's not really anything structured, or it's not in a sense as visible as, to your point, Seth. People take, if I learn DAX and I learn data modeling, I'm good at Power BI, which is the biggest misconception.
Also,
it helps you. It certainly helps
it's
you.
part of the tool belt, but that's not like you're saying. It's all of that stuff is just a means to an end.
So I'm going to go back to the chat thread here on Twitter a bit more. I really liked a visual that she wrote or had kind of about halfway down the article here, talking about who is your data for. If the data is for you, you're doing more of a discovery type of report. If the data visuals are for somebody else, you're looking to inform and or educate. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that is a fair assumption? If you're trying to discover something, the reporting's built for you, but if you're trying to inform or educate, those are for other people or giving data to other individuals.
I think that speaks to this conversation.
That's what I thought was relevant here. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you have to make the flip into making something that is going to be valuable for a wider audience, or technically understanding the audience and knowing what questions you're trying to answer with this report. Right.
I agree.
And a lot of that discovery or analysis that you're doing with the different visualizations are, yes, to answer your own questions, but I think that's where it switches from self-service person to, maybe them building their own reports for a business unit, and incorporating some of those thoughts and ideas, right? But like her addressing these and pointing them out, and our conversation, I think, bode to the fact that you can take this a lot further in, I don't know, man, like educating people on quick wins that they can implement in their self-service reporting.
So I've been trying to build about every 2 weeks a report for myself on either something I'm doing, whether it's cycling or for my company or for just even like books I'm reading. And I'm trying to answer questions. And that, she says it's easier to build reports for yourself. I think when you're under the spotlight, everything changes, and it forces you to think about, wait, I'm looking at this. It's not helping me make any decisions. Like I've literally gone to a report I publish. I go, this report sucks. And I was like, because I'm not answering anything. And I have
this
to
report
go back.
Smells like anchovies.
This report is old tomatoes kind of thing. So like
old tomatoes,
kind of thing. Like this is but seriously though, this goes back to what another thing where building a report for yourself or trying to answer your own questions forces you in that mindset. Rather than I just need to put visuals on, like, well, what am I doing with this? And then going back and reviewing the postmortem, is this report actionable for me? Am I making any decisions off of this? And forcing yourself to do that for your own, performance or information is so important for us to be able to have that empathy for someone else.
I like your idea of the lens. What action this is doing. I think even before building report pages, what do I need to know? What actions are taking? And again, like we say this all the time, but I can't stress enough how much that changes how much I build a report. It really, like, I'll do a lot of data discovery. I'll put a bunch of visuals together. I'll grab a bunch of items. I'll put them down on the page. I don't really know what I'm looking for potentially yet, but to your point, before I publish a report or give it to someone else, or if I actually just push it to PowerBI.com, I am looking for what action am I taking for this? And the reports I use most frequently are come back to visit over and over again. there's 1 or 2 data points that are summarizing or aggregating enough information that I'm looking at that KPI, that ratio, that mix, right, of what's important to me. So that number or those areas, I focus, I build reports around those numbers, and that way I don't have to go dig through every single piece of detail. And what I find, though, I feel like is when I build a report that has those aggregated forms of information, once I have the high level number, I usually go in deeper to say, okay, what's the decomposition of that number? How can I, yes, I see the number here. It's good. Okay, fine. I walk away. I don't know action needed, or there is action needed. Okay, now what? So then there's almost like a sequence of thread of things. Like, okay, I've seen that number. My sales are down based on what I expect it to be or measured against a goal. What do I do now? And then I start trying to hunt for other pages in the report that say, okay, let's start picking apart the pyramid of categories or details or whatever, and start picking things apart and trying to unpack it. So I get to a point where I'm like, oh yeah, I can see it's, we lost 3 salespeople. Sales are down because we're not able to sell enough. So we got to go fill those positions and then bolster more sales or whatever that may be.
That's a common theme, though, right? Like,
agree.
Which is if there's one tip in all this that I could give for newer users of Power BI or reporting or thinking about how do you report for other people, it would be this. As you're doing your data analysis, it's very common for people not just to report the news, right? Like, here's the data and you throw it on a page. But if you think about actions we take, and the common theme that you're speaking to, Mike, is on a high level, yes, it's good to understand like the progress or the good things. Like, give me the metric that like rolls all up all those good things. Is it a sales number? Is it like number of like quality of something? Is it whatever the case may be? Because that gives me a litmus of like, hey, how successful are we? But I quickly move off of that into how do I solve the problems to get better quality? And that's where I dig into the detail. So I don't need details on everything.
Yes.
Typically, I just need to focus my attention in the areas that need fixing.
Correct.
And so it's kind of like, don't throw everything into the report.
Right.
Yeah.
If
totally.
you're going to drill into the details, like, don't give me the noise of like all the successful stuff. I care. What do I care about, and how do I go about increasing my positive something, and like identifying like the negative in which I can like reduce that. So like a great metric within there is over time, as I'm focusing on those detailed negative things, is that decreasing? Like, am I making a positive, impact to whatever this business area is? Then that's a great visual, right? Like, to track that stuff over time. But in general, I think what I've seen way too much of is just tons of visualization and detail around all the positive things, and people don't spend time there.
Yeah. And so 2 awesome points here, Seth. I want to piggyback on, and that I've used myself, is that's really changed the way I build or even just go into any report build. Is one, I needed questions. What are the questions for this report? The direct questions, not the answers, but what questions is this trying to answer? 3 direct questions for a particular audience. So I'm a manager. I'm trying to find what's my team performance, how's my region, are we on track? And that by itself is directly where we focus on building first. The other thing that has really changed the game, and I've talked about this book before, but it's been a game changer, is how to measure anything. And one of the big things is, what are my thresholds? I've been living by this in asking people, and also been like, well, what keeps me up at night? What would keep me up at night about this? So there's going to be a high threshold of if it's over, we're doing great, I'm awesome, I'm going to get promoted. And there's going to be something below where should sound an alarm. If we can understand that context, those thresholds in any measurement, you should have that. You should be able to have a very direct way to answer the questions.
Those are really good points, because it gives like key things, especially like the thresholds, right? What is good and bad in your area? What happens if bad happens, right? Like, how bad is bad, right? But one of the things I consistently am starting to remind even my team of, right, is when you go and talk to folks and you're like, when we talk about our audience and when you're going to like engage, like, what are you guys thinking of? How can we make that a better experience? And
Yes.
more often than not, it immediately falls into technical, right? People need to pause, and we talk about empathy. Put yourself in the end user's seat, right? With those questions, like, what are you trying to answer? Why are you looking at this report? What are the things you need it to tell you? Because if you don't understand that from the get-go, you're probably not going to build the right thing.
You're exactly
The
right.
value of doing it, though, allows us as report authors to sit there and solve some of these problems as we're going through this, like these steps of what's the best visualization, what's the best way I want to lay this out, because I'm putting I've got you answered all these questions for me. You've given me your thresholds. You've like told me exactly what you need, and I understand how you're going to use the report. So all of a sudden, intuitively, I'm choosing things that are slicers instead of filters. I'm putting visuals on a page. I'm building interactions that might be complex to some users, but it's a perfect use case because you wanted to see these things in this way, and this is going to be the fastest way for you to do that, right? Like, and I don't think many people spend enough time in that empathetic range, right? With the tools of like pointed questions, actions, themes, thresholds, etc., that allow you to get that context and push you out of a mindset where it's just data. I'm just presenting it.
Yeah, and I think that also frames what we measure too, where rather than like show me the number of widgets we've built or we produce, what's the cost of a bad widget? What's the cost of not producing a widget at the right time? And that's all of a sudden becomes its own measurement. And also really important, once you frame it that way, rather than we built 1,000 widgets, well, you've 2,000 widgets were faulty. What's the cost of those widgets? That becomes very important to that audience where what are we wasting now? And and I think that goes back to the empathy of, yes, we can build what you said, but what are you really trying to get at? Again, what are you really trying to answer? And a lot of stakeholders I find will try to ask questions directly like in the box of the report and not think outside like, well, what are we really trying to answer? Not I need a bar chart or I need to see trending. I hear that all the time. Can we just see what our sales over the last 2 years? Yeah, but what's that helping you answer? What questions there?
Okay, so here's the random thought, and yes, it's close. It's a little past the half-hour mark. As the brain wakes up, is it this toys something on tickles my brain, right?
Oh, that's my
Is
phrase.
is it the responsibility of the BI team to identify the type of report that is kind of out there in the wild, right? Like if we were going to stack rank the number of users interacting with reports in the organization, right? Like is it the BI team's responsibility to say, hey, this one's just reporting the news, right? Like if we look at the different levels of the type of reporting that we could have, right? I'm reporting the news. This one, like this level, would dive deeper and provide these, better insights. This one gives, more predictive or prescriptive, type information to the end user. I almost feel like that's part of our responsibility in the COE where we're like, or in this data culture where we're identifying this and then teaching our teams that just because you have a report doesn't mean that that's like the end state of how much value you can get out of this. Right. So should there be a process where we're pushing like folks to think about their business in another level so that, if we can start to do forecasting, if we can start to do like more of the advanced kind of back end ETL structures to provide a more robust experience for business units, that like we do that. I mean, obviously you're not doing it everywhere, but there are certain audiences that like I don't think of my process in those terms, right? Like we've talked a little bit about, and where this idea comes from is like we talked a little bit about an end user coming in and they have no idea what they want. Okay, you get some data, it's in a paginated report, right? I've thought about my data a little bit. We're having this conversation. I can provide value to you in this report because you actually have some actions that come out of questions you have, right? And this is where we kind of dovetail into, understanding thresholds and like how can we make a meaningful report to you. But I don't think about it as like, okay, that we're in level 2. Now you're an end user. And I'm gonna put a check mark here. I'm gonna say I'm gonna come back, and in this conversation, keep thinking about your data, and we'll do the same, and we'll see if we can enhance this or provide even better insights for you in the future. Is it worth it?
Yes. I actually just
Mike is on the fence.
I'm just
So I think I'm a bit more on the fence on this one, just because I think it's worth it because you're trying to evolve the data culture of the company in general.
And
right?
that's the context.
I agree. I think that part is worth it. However, I think is everyone in your organization there to fully comprehend or understand or incorporate into their workflow that additional level of questioning?
Absolutely not.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
And I think Alex Powers has dialed it right on the head here. Paginate everything for these users. Like, so I also feel like too, like,
get out of here, Alex. Get out of here.
No. Hold on. I think this is a chicken before the egg thing, Mike. I think where does it start in terms of how do you get those people on board then? I think Seth's point is actually helping shape the culture.
Yes, but I don't think you shape everyone's culture all at once.
No,
I think it starts with
that.
There are a few people. I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like the threshold of individuals being able to really dive in deep and to be able to go to like, okay, let's start figuring out what does prediction things look like? What deeper analytical questions should we be asking of ourselves? But I think those questions are also, you have to be very comfortable with where you're at currently. And some people are just unwilling or not wanting to take that extra hunger or thirst or need to get to that next level of things. So I think it's very dependent on the people.
But so let me rephrase my question, right?
Okay.
Because it's in the context of a BI team in data culture, right? If I as a BI team don't even have this as part of my process, and that's what I'm asking is, should it be part of my process that the reports my team is building should always have an enhancement path, or we've checked off and said, yeah, we can't really take this any further with the data sets that we have. And I guess eventually lead other business units to understand, like, this is how we think about our reporting, like our reporting scheme or our process of things, because like there can be a ton of value in taking it to that next level.
Agreed.
But it is not every use case. I'm just saying I haven't thought about that in it. Like I haven't thought about this in adding it as part of my process or things to like go enhance and look for new opportunities of existing reports that have been created or built.
I think my feeling here is your mileage will vary, right? I think there are some reports that you will be able to do that with and do it very successfully. I think you could go into some reports and say, yeah, I could clearly see if we had this XYZ additional data, this report could get so much more impactful. We could do much better prediction on things. And I feel like those type of reporting pieces make a lot of sense. There are other reports that I think we don't need to provide recommendations to. So I feel like it's not an all-encompassing scenario. I think you might be spending extra money or dollars or time to be able to produce this for every report, and you would selectively pick a couple of the most impactful reports or where you felt like you could move the needle, right? For example, like if we were, I don't know, this is where the size of the impact, I think, to me matters, right? If I'm able to build reporting that's going to be able to, 2x our revenue, heck yeah, we should spend all our time doing that. But if I'm spending a lot of time building reports or working on things that are going to just save us, $1,000 where we're trying to make millions, like it's kind of a scaling thing, right? Where does the size of the impact lives?
I think the benefit's not just direct revenue. I think there's two benefits to the what Seth is saying. One, it changes for those people the expectations of what the BI team does, and also the way they're perceiving measurements. Rather than build a bar chart, we'll build a bar chart. Now there's a way, okay, we're going to measure this, we're going to monitor this. Does this have any impact for you? It changes. I want this, build this, then we're done, move on. And that's the normal process. So it excuse leadership from the BI team where you need the right people in place, but you're also changing the way they're perceiving data, because we're going to say, hey, you said you want to see sales over the last 2 years. Based on our conversation, we think you want to actually see who's actually, missing a call or the opportunities. Let's monitor this new way to look at this. And this is how we want you to look at this. If you find impact, we're going to review this in 2 weeks. Not only, I think, does this provide, like, should there be a story for this, there should be a budget or resources for this way of our relationship with the business.
Oh man, this is good.
Okay. So I as I said in the idea, as it was like tickling my brain, sort your most used reports, right? So like Mike, you honed in on that. Absolutely. Biggest impact.
Yeah, let's go for big impact first.
Only the biggest impact stuff, right? I agree. It would be a small subset. I'm just saying in this conversation, I'm now going to actually look for those opportunities. Whereas
I think before, you do. Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, well, we'll just like, is that being requested by the person? And more often than not, it's not going to be.
Right.
No, it won't be.
They don't know it yet.
Right.
They don't know that's what we can do, or that's even part of it. They think build a report. Here's a bar chart, build a line chart. Rather than coming in with it like, well, let's help you measure something else rather than just total sales.
Maybe I've been a consultant for too long because I feel like there's a mix of this too, right? There's a part of this that is, yes, to some degree, yes, I agree with you, Tommy. Like we should be pushing the boundaries and showing you here is what is possible. Hey, by the way, what you're describing here sounds like a metrics, and we're going to build something with metrics, and we're going to track things over time. And by the way, we can build reports on top of metrics and all the other, like there's good things that happen there. On the other side, though, I think there is a level of reporting that is just mechanical in nature. It's just, we've just had to report these numbers. And I think this speaks to the topic of, is it access to data?
Saving money in those processes.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Are you saving? Is this a process that is, we need access to the data, or do I need insights on data? And I think anytime we're talking about insightful reporting, to your point, Seth, I think those ones, we spend a little bit of extra time. And hopefully, as we get more familiar with the data, the reporting, the needs of that business unit, we can then more aptly recommend those things. I just am hesitant to spend copious amounts of time on that if we don't feel like it would make large amounts of impact.
I don't think it's a marginal amount of time, though, to do this. It is extra time, but I don't think it's double the effort. At all,
man.
So let me tell you,
that was a loaded sigh right there.
From both worlds and trying this methodology out, it's a heck of a lot easier to do as a consultant because there's already an expectation of what the BI team is. You're like, no, you're BI.
Okay,
I was gonna. And I'm as a consultant. They go, oh, you're a consultant. You must know what you're talking about.
In this, I was like, as Mike was talking, I'm like, oh, I hear what's going on here. Like we have 3 levels of reporting in our organization. One is the one you request. The second is the enhancements we make, and then the third is we just call Mike Carlo
hire consultant. Well, I mean, I thought of what I was hearing here was
what you want us to say.
What I feel like it was saying. What I feel like I was hearing, like, this is fine and dandy. Like in my mind, I'm thinking consultants do this all the time. They show in and be like, here. Everyone goes, tell us what is the art of the possible, and do like these amazing things. Like as someone who's a bystander, someone on the outside of the politics of the company, it's very easy to come and be like, yeah, this doesn't work. Yeah, this is not impactful. This is not helping.
Because he knows what he's talking about.
But I think internal to the companies, I think it's a bit more challenging because there's a lot more political power there. There's a lot more internal stuff that's occurring. So again, you're trying to do, as internal to a company, you're trying to do 2 things: add value, and you're trying to make sure that you are doing your job successfully. So like if you are spending so much extra time working on things that are not directly adding value, or it will add value, but they don't see the story, they're not being sold the story, it's much harder to convince people to spend that extra money or dollars. And I think your comment, Tommy, around funding, there should be I think it is a great idea to have an organization spend some level of money or investment around making sure this is impactful, because doing data things well drives better business, period. Data drives all of this. However, I don't think a lot of organizations, or maybe the leaders in organizations, don't see the value in the spend on those areas. And therefore we fall back into this maybe bad habit of, okay, just give me my report, just pop it out. let's just count the number of reports we make because that means we're making value.
And I think there's a story, and just from the internal side, I've had people who really latched on to this idea. We're going to create this evolving measurement, and people who got offended by this because they wanted what they wanted. But I think you can frame the story from a cost point of view. Internally, we had a product that we were launching, and it was like, well, they just want to see the overall sales, but shouldn't we measure how much we put into this new product, what the success is going to be? And we built this time in terms of how much time we're going to spend building these new measurements to say, if people can make these better decisions, what would that actually be what value would there be?
Quantify it.
Does
this report make you money or save you money?
And you can identify,
don't build it unless it does those things.
It's not so much, I think, identifying the reports you want to do this to, it's identifying the teams or maybe projects coming up.
Okay, I like that. I like going higher level than just reports. I like going team level things.
I think you have a team coming, they're doing a migration. Is this a good candidate to try this new methodology out where, hey, we're going to measure rather than minutes completed, or what's the cost of not doing it, or what's the value of doing this on time? Whatever we're trying to identify the thresholds with the team. And you can quantify that. If you can say something's good or bad, you can measure it. You can quantify it.
There's a podcast that came out of the last 2 minutes here that we need to add to the roster here, which is if I was gonna like throw a title on it.
Here's your $1 million idea. Here it comes.
Consultant in a company versus consulting in your own company.
We've done something similar.
I don't think so.
We did a consulting versus internal.
Did we?
Yeah.
That's interesting, because a lot of the points that you guys were just making is revolve around consultants can come into a company, and it by default it's the business value over everything else. Mm-hmm. But what happens in a lot of, like, and we call it politics in an organization, but like there are a lot of FTEs that make decisions for that are focused on me rather than business. And when that happens, this is why it's challenging to get some things done in an organization.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can talk about that at length,
but that's another. So Simon Sinek talks a lot about this as well. If there's a culture inside the company where you are continually running around CYA, trying to cover yourself, there's so much more energy wasted on just making sure that my head's down. I'm going to be able to retain the company. I stay here, and you're not willing to be the nail that pops above, because the hammer will come down and pound in the nail.
I'm gonna have to relook if we talked about this before. I don't
know. Episode 91.
Oh, God.
Power BI Worlds.
Let's just
consulting versus in-house work.
Man.
Yeah, but this is slightly different.
We'll change it. It was 100 episodes.
We'll see.
I'm sure it's different by now. We'll have to go back and listen to it. I'm sure we've evolved since then.
Mike, what does ChatGPT think about this topic?
Oh, you know what? I did not do it on Tuesday. I think I missed it. I'll keep talking. I have to spin it up here.
Rafael's on the same page, right? At the same time as me.
It's time. Shut up, guys.
Time. I have a mini experiment. There's a mini experiment happening right now that you have no idea to the end, and I'll tell you what it is.
A mini experiment happening.
You'll see.
Oh, ooh, I'm enthralled.
Enthralled or intrigued?
Both.
Both. I'm both of the things.
We'll see if the measurement. We'll see.
Why can we see Mike on the podcast, or is this after?
No, it's going to be you'll see. It'll be at the end.
Oh boy. I think Tommy's been word counting.
Now you're leading up to something.
The word
what does ChatGPT think?
All right. So what's the question we need to prompt here? I don't really have
a
great question.
What is data communication?
What is data communication? Seems a bit vanilla. How do I better data communicate? How do we,
how do you communicate with data in an organization?
How do you communicate with data? Tell me 3 tips that make you communicate better with data.
You are a communicating data person. Here's what I want you to do.
Oh, you are the lead BI engineer at your company. Tell me what your top 3 initiatives are.
I do this all day.
Okay.
We should just have a hackathon with asking
chat GPT what the answers are. What are the top 3 best ways to communicate about data? Let's
While
see what it
Mike is
says.
doing that, I do want to give a shout out to Kat once again. I think go check out the article. Did we paste that in there that elicited this whole Twitter thread?
I'll put that in here now.
It's reinforcing a lot of great things about how do we communicate information. She gives some really good tips towards the end for folks that are new to thinking about audiences, thinking about how we produce reporting of value, not just for ourselves but for others. And we love kind of not only talking about like hopefully some of what people wrote, because we always go on a sidetrack, right?
Yeah.
In our days, but love promoting folks that we find on the interwebs.
We don't do interviews, but this would be someone I would love to interview because I love the way this was framed.
Yeah, it was fun.
But
so if you don't know, so she runs Rogue Penguin, which I guess is out of her own business out of New Zealand. Came from an analyst position and kind of moved into this whole data visualization space a while ago. So
the most pressing question here: are there penguins in New Zealand? Is that a thing?
Ask ChatGPT.
I don't know about that one.
All right, what do we got?
So the question is, what are the top 3 best ways to communicate about data? The 3 things that came back from ChatGPT were, number 1, visualizations. The most effective way is to communicate through a data visualization, such as a chart, graph, and or map. I would argue you'd probably nix the map. I'm glad I didn't say pie chart, because that would have been a score of 1 for my opinion if we had a pie chart in there. Storytelling. Another effective way is to communicate through data storytelling. This involves narratives, contextualizing the data, and helping the audience understand its significance. Okay. The last one is contextualization, big word. It also provides it is also essential to provide context when communicating about data. This involves explaining the data's background and the methods used to collect and analyze it. That seems very scientific in nature, because that's what you do a lot of, like, in research papers and things as well. So I also added a follow-up question: what is data communication? And it answered by, data communication refers to the process of transmitting and receiving data between or to or more devices or systems, talking about like wireless networks or local area networks. The data communication process is involving several key components: the source of data, the transmission, and the receiver. I think that was a better statement right there, because if we're building reports, right, the report has 3 things, right? The source of the data, transmission of the data, and the receiver of the data. If you think about those 3 pieces, whether it's data through a wire or data through your report, that's what you're doing. You're kind of building out those 3 areas of communicating to the next person about that information. I would say this is a pretty weak one at this point. Maybe the question wasn't prompted very well. Didn't really love this one. I'd probably give it like if we're doing 7 or 10, Tommy. What's the scale?
What do you think?
You say 7.
All right.
So I'll give it like a 5. It's about a mid.
5 out of 7.
5 out of 7.
Seth?
2.3 out of 10.
You caught on. I give it a 2 out of 7. So.
I thought Seth was going to go like out of 1,000. Like, I'm going to give it a 527 out of 1,000.
So the
points are made up. The scale is arbitrary.
Yeah. No, actually, that's the experiment.
Oh.
So I've been preaching the 1 out of 7 scale. This goes to show you can measure and value anything, or you can measure anything differently or perceive anything differently. 1 out of 7 is very different from 1 out of 10. You're already catching on the 1 out of 7 or the 1 out of 7 scale.
Yeah.
You asked me, kind of thing.
Yeah, I did.
So we can measure things and value things differently. This goes now we've wrapped the whole thing up.
Well, this podcast is definitely a 7 after that comment. So let's
8 out of 7.
This is an 8 out of 7. So with that, we thank you all very much for listening to the podcast. You burned through a perfectly good hour with us. We appreciate your time, your listenership. Everyone's giving scores now in the chat window. 1.5 to 7.75. Yeah, I like it too. So give us your score. Throw it in the chat window.
This is the way.
I like it. Community, you are awesome. We really appreciate you very much for participating. This has been a lot of fun. And then we'll catch you next time. So our only ask for this very free podcast and this very good waste of your hour of your day is, if you wouldn't mind, share it to somebody else so they can burn a perfectly good hour as well. Maybe walking, maybe we're trying to fall asleep, cook some dinner or something like that. Something that's kind of mundane. Maybe we can give you a couple laughs as we go along here and talk about data. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Go ahead and get us a high measurement and rate us on Spotify and Apple. It helps us out a ton. You can join us every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on the Power BI Tips social media channels, or subscribe and listen to all of our previous 211 episodes.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and we'll catch you next time.